Hello students, welcome to Zeitgeist, Module 1, poem titled Freedom by Rabindranath Tagore. Let's see his biographical details first, then we shall move to detailed explanation of the poem. Rabindranath Tagore was a Bengali poet. As you all know, he framed the Indian national anthem. But apart from that, he was not only just a poet, he was a philosopher, musician, writer, and educationist. He established many institutions in West Bengal, namely Vishwabharati and other institutions. And most importantly, he contributed in Bengali literature, and due to that, he is also known as the Bard of Bengal. And later, all the works translated to English by the author himself. By considering all his literary contribution and most importantly, Gitanjali, he was awarded Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1913. And by that, he became the first Asian and non-European to receive a Nobel Prize. Gitanjali was the important work. And the poetic collections Manasi, Sonardhari, Gidimalya, and Balaka are the major contributions of the writer. His poetic songs are viewed as spiritual, mystic, and patriotic. Gitanjali is spiritual bit, and here the poem Freedom is patriotic, as the title indicates, it's a freedom from the colonizers. Now let's move to the poem. Freedom from fear is the freedom. I claim you for my motherland. See, this is the first line of the poem. The poem is written in free verse. You can see the first line, freedom from fear is the freedom. The F sound is stressed, and that's an alliteration by which he means that freedom is the most important thing, and he urges the freedom or he stresses the importance of freedom by the alliteration. And in the in the next stanza, you can see a metaphor where India is compared to a ship. You can see this, all sails are weakly gilded. Sail means the ship, a sail of a ship, and the ship is India. So here that's a metaphor where India becomes a ship and Indians are all travelers in the ship. We can see it in detail. I just mentioned the literary tools in this poem. This is the first line, freedom from fear is the freedom. I claim you for my motherland, freedom from the burden of the ages, bending your heart, breaking your back, blinding your eyes to the beckoning call of the future. Freedom from the fear is the freedom. That's the first line. Why Indians are afraid of Britishers? See, that is why Tagore says freedom from fear is the real freedom. Because Indians lived with fear in pre-independence era. Britishers controlled us for more than a century. Their administration was very cruel and brutal. That is why Tagore says freedom from fear is the freedom. So he began to think about a period where India will be independent, India will be free from any other fear by administration. That's what Tagore says, freedom from fear is the freedom. I claim you for my motherland. Yes, of course, motherland is India, and here I claim for you my motherland. So I'm claiming a freedom that is free from fear for you to my motherland. Freedom from the burden of the ages, bending your head, breaking your back, blinding your eyes to the beckoning call of the future. Freedom from the burden of the ages. What is burden? Burden means something, a load or weight that you carry on your back. So here author says, I claim freedom from the burden of ages. I told you British rule was not for an year, not for a decade, it was more than a century. So he says burden of ages. Yes, of course, it was the burden of ages. Bending your head. Yes, we Indians bend our head in front of British masters. We had no other option. Breaking our back. And most importantly, blinding your eyes to the beckoning call of the future. We had that future in front of us, but our eyes were blind. We couldn't see the beckoning call, that attractive call of the future. What is the future? An independent nation, an independent country. That we couldn't see. We were blind enough to see that beckoning call of that future. I hope it's clear. Let's move to the next stanza. Freedom from the shackles of slumber, over with you, fasten yourself in the night stillness. Here again he claims, Tagore claims freedom from the shackles of slumber. Slumber means sleep. So we were all sleeping by accepting the British rule. So I claim freedom from the shackles of slumber. Shackles mean something that prevents you doing what. So we were all sleeping, we were all passively accepting British administration, British rule, or colonial power, colonial force. We were all sleeping, and we were all with you fasten yourself in the night stillness. We were all sleeping in, or rather we were comfortably sitting in a night stillness. We can say comfortably in the normal sense, I mean with ignoring all the calls for independence, mistrusting the star that speaks of truth's adventurous paths, freedom from the anarchy of destiny. So mistrusting, we couldn't trust the star that speaks truth's adventurous path. What is truth? Of course, India is independent. That's a truth, and we mistrusted that truth of adventurous path to independence. Of course, independence is not an easy thing. That was adventurous. That was really required a lot of efforts, but we couldn't follow that adventurous path to independence and freedom from the anarchy of destiny. We Indians thought this passivity or this colonial rule is our destiny or anarchy of destiny. We thought we have no other option and we accepted it as our fate or destiny, but that was not true. And here author says freedom, we need freedom from that anarchy of destiny. And you have to remember one thing, when this poem was written, India was not even nearing independence. It was years before India's independence. All sails are weakly yielded to the blind uncertain winds. All sails are weakly yielded. What is sail here? Sail means the ship, a sail of a ship, a journey of a ship. And what is ship here? Ship is of course India. India is a ship. India is compared to a ship, and that is a metaphor used by Rabindranath Tagore here. And all sails are weakly, very weak, yielded to the blind, uncertain winds. We started our journey, and our journey, the ship was controlled by Britishers. The ship was controlled by Britishers, and that was yielded to the blind, uncertain winds. They ruled according to their wish, not Indians' wish. And the helm to the hand of ever rigid and cold as death. And helm of the ship. What is helm? Helm in the sense that steering or control of the ship that was in the hands of rigid and cold as death. That was in a hand that was cold as death. It's very clear. It was the steering ship steering was controlled by Britishers, the colonial force, and we Indians had no role in the sail. So the ship was moving with uncertain winds, and most importantly the helm was controlled by British force, and that the hand which controlled Indian ship was rigid and cold as death. It was very deadly. Freedom from the insult of dwelling in a puppet's world. So author claims freedom from the insult of dwelling in a puppet's world. We are all living in a puppet's world in the pre-independence era he is referring to. What is puppet's world? Puppet's world means a doll or an animal is controlled by strings from the other side. That is puppet's world as it is seen in the images. So freedom from the insult of living in a puppet's world. We were all living in a puppet's world in pre-independence era, where movements are started through brainless ways. You know how we were moved. We were all moving according to the controls from brainless wires. Britishers controlled us, or colonial powers controlled us, and our movements started through brainless wires. They controlled us, they asked us to do something, and we did. They asked to pay us taxes, we did it. Likewise, repeated through mindless habit. So, whatever they thought, they made us do it. Where figures wait with patience and obedience for the masters of show. See, we Indians waited for the masters of show. Who is the master of show here? Of course, colonial force. They controlled us and we waited patiently. We had no other option and we waited until the British master of show, say something or do something. And we stirred into the mimicry of life. What is mimicry of life? Mimicry of life in the sense not a real life. In pre-independent India, we all had a mimicry of life, or not the real life, unreal life controlled by others. So by in a puppet's world, we all lived like a mimicry of life that was not an original or real life. It was a copy of life, or a life controlled by external forces. I hope it's clear the imagery puppets world you can see in the image puppets world. Now let's move to exercises. The first question is image of colonialism in the poem. You can see many images of colonialism in the poem, from bending your head, obedience, passive obedience. The ship was controlled by an external force. We were moving in the wrong direction. Likewise, many images are there of colonialism. Colonialism is a state where another country rules for their benefits, not for our benefits. And second question is define the concept of freedom based on the poem. What is real freedom according to Rabindranath Tagore? Yes, as in the first line, freedom from fear, freedom free to live as the individual wish for, not by a force from outside. Likewise, there are many a concept of freedom is introduced by Rabindranath Tagore, and you have to just explain it in detail. I hope it's clear. Thank you for your patience. I'll see you on the next chapter.